morning. Thank you for coming, and thanks to everyone at Creative Mornings for giving me the opportunity to speak. Today's talk is Restart a Brief Discourse in Catastrophic Failure. And really it's mostly it's a look back at a lifetime of making tons of mistakes, some of them huge mistakes, and what I've personally learned from starting over. So before I begin, would you all mind if I just take a quick shot? I'm sorry, it's so lame, but I have to do it. So before I totally crash and burn, look like it's going great, if you could. Thank you. Okay, now we can carry on. So before I start, just a few disclaimers, or what I call the fine print. And the first thing is, I'm definitely not a professional speaker. If any of you have ever considered getting up here, it is absolutely terrifying. So if I mumble or if I speak too quickly or just act weird, just let me know and I'll fix it. Number two is, this is really a casual talk. I wish I could deliver something like a TED Talk, but there probably won't be any epiphanies here. You may have heard some of this before, but hopefully there'll be something of interest. And finally, and this is just a simple thing, I use the word designer a lot because it's what I do currently, but hopefully it's interchangeable with creative. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing, if I were one of you sitting there, what I would think is, who is this guy, and why am I listening to him talk about creativity? Basically, am I legit? And I don't know if I am or not, but a little bit about myself and what I do. My name is Alfonso Fabrega, and I am a UX and visual designer. I am an illustrator. I'm an artist. I do motion graphics and branding. I do a ton of creative work. So I'm a creative professional. I've done a lot of work for .coms. I have worked for years at Pixel Media here in Portsmouth. And yes, I do work at QuickBase as a senior visual designer. So I was born and raised in Santa Monica, California. Kind of a sheltered life, growing up, idyllic. I was creative at the outgo. Not really encouraged to be so. This was way back. So, but I still was anyway. When I was 18, I packed my bags, went to school in the San Francisco Bay Area. I studied architecture at California College of the Arts. I got married. In 1994, I found the internet. So this sounds like a million years ago, but I really fell in love with digital design. So I had a job in an architectural office, and at that point, I'm like, I'm done. So I hopped into a .com. Like I said, I got married. Promptly lost my job during the .com bust. So we moved to Seattle, and I spent 2 years working working with Microsoft, SeattleSidewalk.com, way back before Yelp was around. And if anyone ever tells you that the whole thing about the Seattle rain is a myth, I'm here to tell you it is really, really rainy. And so we left after just 2 years. I know. We're wimps. So we crossed the country and landed in Portsmouth. Bought a house, had a daughter, and I've been living and working in Portsmouth for the past 19 years, so ever since. So some information about what I do, because I guess UX designer doesn't sound very creative. But I do a lot of things. So I illustrate. Part of what I do, the yellow one, the green one, those are illustrations for mobile applications onboarding. The top right one is a shirt. That's a study in walk cycles for motion graphics. That was that tattoo that somebody had asked that I designed for them. So I do illustration. I do artwork, so mostly pen and ink. I do paint. I do mixed media, and I don't know, you might have caught some of my work at Enormous Tiny Art. I show very occasionally. I do branding. Pardon for the offensive image, sorry. Part of the brand. So I do branding. I'm just in love with typography and lettering. If anyone's ever strolled down State Street, you may have seen the Hotel Portsmouth sign. And I do user experience design. So this is just a screenshot of one of my sketch files. It's the assets for our latest release of our mobile app. So I do a lot of things. And before I forget, I guess I'm going to say that I'll take this opportunity to say that if there are like younger people, I think that having a career in the creative industry is not actually sustainable, and or it's boring. And I like to think that at least my work shows that it's not boring. And I will definitely tell you I'm an example of it being sustainable. And, hopefully they're not afraid to pursue it, because there are huge opportunities right now. There are amazing projects. So if anyone who's interested, go to the site, reach out to me. I will review portfolios, do what it takes to get people in the field. So back to our talk. And we're here to talk about restarting. And for me, restarting goes hand in hand with mistakes. It's part of our process. It's what we do day in and day out. And I mean, I'm pretty sure, I won't speak for all creatives, but I think for almost all creative fields, this is what happens. We are taking care of just thousands of mistakes all day long, just these tiny micro mistakes that are pretty much harmless, but it's what we do. And I think that what we end up seeing, well, I'll give you an example. This is an example. Let's say you have an icon you need to create, which sounds really dumb. Icons sound so dull. But say you have an icon set, you need to create an icon. So you have your look and feel, you've got your form, you've got your meaning, and you drop it in there. And hey, it doesn't play nicely with the other icons, so you nudge it around. Or hey, it doesn't read at this distance, so you again tweak it. You're tweaking lines and colors and placement, just like what's happening up here, all day long. And in the end, you've got an icon, and that's one icon. Times a million for the rest of your career, right? So in the end, what you may not realize when you look at, say, something that we call, complete or done, it's not just, well, someone had a vision and they did, or it's their job. Really, what it is, it's this, long period, this cumulative period of mistake correction, of these nudges and pixel by pixel and stroke by stroke adjustments that where you end up with something that looks perfect or done. Yeah. So why do creatives restart? Why do we toss things out? What is it that causes us to do that if we're so kind of used to making mistakes? Like I said, if it's part of our day, we should be, really we're gluttons for punishment because it's nonstop. So I've kind of identified 3 types of mistakes so we can just review. Number 1, I do call it the noob, and this is you're new to your job, you're trying out a new technique, or you've got new tools, a new computer, a new brush, whatever. You're expected to make mistakes, and these may be sad and disappointing, but in reality, again, you're expected, and the beauty is, you can correct it. So they are not going to cause you to restart, and there are pros. In this case, the more mistakes you learn, or mistakes you make, the more you learn. The second one, I call the dummy, and I do it in a self-deprecating way because I will say that by far this is me right now. I make mistakes all the time of this type, and they will make you curse. They are, they're irritating, but again, they're not going to make you restart. And again, you can fix them, and again, they do have their pros. You will learn from them. You can also have what I call a happy accident. So you spill some paint on something, and for all you know, that actually could drive the piece. So there are opportunities there. And the last one I call the catastrophic failure. And this is the one we want to look at. It is the one that's going to cause you to restart, because it's the one where you hit a point in a project where you realize it's not going well. But not only that, you've kind of run out of every kind of trick in the book, every whatever filter, every piece of advice. You've looked at it right side up, upside down, and it's not going to work. So yeah, that's that point. And I think that I've given it a name, actually. When you've hit that point where you say, I'm done, there's nothing I can do, but you're not yet at the point of saying, I'm going to throw everything out. And I call it the long dark tea time of the soul. It's totally stolen from Douglas Adams. And I don't even know if I'm using it right, but for me, it's very descriptive, because you have this, whether it's a 20-second period, because sometimes it's not, maybe it's, I don't know, it happens that fast, but for me anyway, my experience with these, it's these long, contemplations before you hit that conclusion of tossing everything out. And it's depressing, it's awful. So you probably want an example of when this has happened to me. So I'm going to give you one. The problem is I don't have anything to show you, and there's a couple of reasons why. Whenever I've had to restart, the last thing I really want to see is the work that made me do it. It's depressing to me. So it's terrible. I think a lot of artists will say, you keep everything. I don't. If it's that bad, it's out. So I've got nothing to show. The other thing, it's just really embarrassing to show what ends up being really bad work. So nothing to see here. Imagine your most awful thing here. So a few years ago, I was asked to do a two-man show, and it was kind of a big deal for me. I'd never done one. I'd done small things, but this was like, my first real show, and I wanted to be just massive. And immediately I'm like, okay, it's going to be these large format paintings. You have to know that I really am not really a painter, but that's what I wanted to do because it was a show. And I wanted to be intricate, and I wanted to have all these stories that tie this, fancy theme together. And that was it. So I started. We were given several months, I would say like 5 months to get this thing done. And about 2.5 months in, so like around the halfway point, I'd already course corrected it a number of times. It's not like you're just doing things, willy-nilly or blindly, but you start making these adjustments, but you slowly start eliminating all the things you can do to bring this thing on track. And by the 2.5 mark, I'm working on this thing, and I'm looking at everything and thinking, yeah, this thing's not going to happen. It's just not going to work. This is that, dark tea time of the soul moment where it's like, oh crap, what am I going to do? So I realized that there were two things that were kind of the issue here. One, I had not the technical skills to execute this. I only admitted it at that halfway point. I was like, great idea, Alfonso, you're just not good enough. And that's okay. The second thing I would say is, I think that I had gone in with a preconceived solution, which is a terrible thing to do. And I was force-fitting it. And at that point, I realized, this isn't Alfonso. It's not me. It's what I thought I should be doing. So I hit that point, and I did decide to restart. I just chucked everything out. And that's what happens. You hit a point. You hit a point where you have to get this path. Path number one is the dark path. And this is the path I would highly recommend not to do. It's easier, I think, in the short term, but it's kind of soul-crushing in the long term. And that is, you decide to just plow ahead. You just say, you know what? You're afraid of a deadline, or you're afraid of a budget or a timeline. You say, I have to get it done anyway. And it's when you've heard this phrase before, and for me, it's kind of like, it's the Voldemort of the design world or creative world. It is what it is, and we should never hear that. In fact, that's the last time I hope any of you ever say it. You can't. So the second path, I would say, is the preferred one. And this one is really hard in the short term, but I think in the long term, this is where you want to be. And that is to just accept the fact that this isn't the right thing to do, and you just chuck it. The funny thing is, I probably should admit this, but I have not been moving my pages at all. I have no idea where I am in my talk. So I'm just being honest. All right. Oh, right. Upsides. So before I do that, I would say, you look at this and you're thinking to yourself, wow, there's no good solution here. And, right? There isn't. And it's true, there is not. But again, I will say, this is the path we really do want to go down. And even though it seems just miserable, there are upsides. Number one, you do learn something. So with the catastrophic failure, at the very least, you're going to learn what not to do. You have all the other nice things people say about making mistakes. Yeah, you'll, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But the big thing is, yeah, you're going to learn something. So it's not a complete waste of time. Number two, it's actually possibly faster. This sounds counterintuitive, but I think that, for example, in my case, you don't want to be, is it Sisyphus, the guy with the ball? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. You don't want to be that guy, right? Because you're making this huge effort, and you don't want to be doing it, and it's not working, and it's just slow. It's also, for a creative person, really working something that is not actually the correct solution, yeah, you're just never going to get into it. However, if you chuck everything out, you may actually land on in a situation where you love it. It is the right solution. You understand this inherently as a creative, and you will work faster. Number three, you will open your mind. I see a lot of times, and I'll be honest and say this happens to me occasionally, I think creative people will lock into a particular solution, and it's very hard to get rid of it. However, if you crash and burn, that's not a choice anymore. You have to get rid of it. In fact, you probably hate that idea already anyway. So it is a way, I would call it a kind of a creative freedom that that's kind of catastrophic failure will give you to be creative and come up with another solution. Kick in the pants. No one likes this. It's not a fun thing either. But you know what? I don't know about the rest of you, but sometimes I will languish in non-decision making. And having something like this, I don't want to perpetuate a generalization that, oh yeah, creatives, they can't make decisions and they work so slowly. But sometimes, I don't know, maybe we do need a kick in the pants. I know I do. Upsides, get over yourself. And this is kind of a big one, I think. It has to do with that whole knowing the solution. I think design and other creative fields too, just painting, sculpture, whatever. I think that sometimes we get caught up in whether it's ego or I don't know what it is, but we feel like we know the answer. And that's not a good mindset, especially for a creative. I think that you need to be more open-minded, and there are other solutions. So having a catastrophic failure, I think, is a lesson in humility. And hopefully, you start to lose that whole ego, I'm right all the time kind of approach. Okay, so you now probably want an example. And so I'm going to give you one. This is me when I was a kid. And so this is the story of my first horrible, horrible, catastrophic failure. And the interesting thing is, I'm bringing this up. It's not a design failure. But what I find kind of fascinating is that I don't know the whole chicken egg thing here, but the way when you're working at a microscopic level, doing your work at whatever, again, painting, typography, whatever, and dealing with all these mistakes, some of them are catastrophic. The same things happen in real life, and I like I said, I don't know what informs the other, but you start to generate a pattern of how you handle these things. So it's interesting to look back, and for me, this is a look back at this where I grew up and I was kind of a model kid. I was super polite. I was a straight A student. I was in all the honor societies when I was in high school. I was even, I would call it a really good athlete, to the point where when I graduated in a school where football was all, I weirdly enough got athlete of the year and I was a runner. So I was kind of a model person, right? And at that time, like I said, I had been creative for all my growing up, but it wasn't encouraged. Really, at the time, if you did well, you were going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. That's what you were going to be. I mean, it's a little mind-blowing to me now, but I kind of drank the Kool-Aid and applied to and was accepted to the School of Engineering at UC Berkeley. So I turn 18 and off I go, right? And I get there, I'm all on my own, and I start to realize a few things. Number one is I'm not this special guy. I'm probably way academically inferior to almost everyone I was looking around at. It was just, already it's starting to set in, the first nudgings of mistakes. I realized that I would go to these lectures filled with literally hundreds of students in these lecture halls, and listening to a Nobel laureate go on and on about chemistry. And I was falling asleep, and everyone else was rapt. This was amazing to them, and it wasn't for me. All these things start to happen, and over the year, things got worse and worse until, I do kind of like hit this weird point of, I'm trying everything. I'm trying tutors and everything like that, and it's not going well. And yeah, you all know where I'm going, right? So it's very depressing. And I did hit this point where I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And it did happen. So I didn't make it. And I'm just going to put it in the most clear terms possible, because this is kind of the moment to do it. And that is, I failed out of Berkeley. I failed. Big time, hardcore. And that was my first introduction to absolute catastrophic failure. In fact, telling my parents is terrible. And it is just dark. The dumb thing is, this tea time didn't last 20 seconds or an hour. It's not like an hour-long conversation. The worst thing about this one was, it was my first one, so I made, I didn't get these things. And it was a couple of years where I got the boot, but in my mind I was like, okay, that was the answer. I'm going to force fit it. I am going to make it work. So even though it was partial tea time, I'm still trying to solutionize it. Solutionize it, is that a word? So I was taking classes, trying to get back in, and as that time passed, that's when I was realizing, okay, this isn't really working. And I was hanging out with art kids, doing creative projects on my own, and one time I took a course at Berkeley. It's kind of their first studio class in architecture, and I was blown away. Spending all night building models, coming up with interesting concepts, because first year studio is all not structures, it's more concept. And it was just amazing. And I was so into it that I realized, wow, this is more of what I should be doing, not calculations, not math, not physics. So I applied and got into art school. And I started to flourish, and went from some kid who was told what to do and to have a notion of what the solution is, to this guy who may not have actually been what his parents wanted him to be. That may not be the ultimate solution, but it's where I was meant to be. It was the correct solution. So why am I telling you this? I think that, it kind of dovetails into my kind of final points, and that's really about this idea of this kind of creative culture I kind of seem to be observing. And I may be generalizing, so take this with a grain of salt, I guess. Where I feel that collectively we have kind of become, and you've definitely all heard this, kind of become afraid to fail. And there are some points that kind of, I wish we could kind of get over these kind of hurdles. And number one would be, we seem to be afraid of our own opinions and thoughts. I feel like sometimes we'll read a Medium post and we'll take it as gospel immediately and hop onto the bandwagon and kind of espouse that without really trying it out ourselves or giving it a chance or frankly, not agreeing with it. It's really difficult, I think, nowadays to say, maybe I don't disagree, but I'm not ready to accept this yet. You kind of run the risk of looking dumb, and that's not good. Number two, I think that sometimes we're not as confident in our skills as we should be. So with design, for example, I think we're given a task, a problem, and it's really easy to immediately jump to something like Dribble, which is a site where you can see these beautiful designs, and you're not actually solutioning. What you're doing is you're saying, you're jumping to somebody else's solution, maybe not even for the same problem, instead of saying, hey, I'm a creative. I'm creative because I have these abilities to analyze and come up with these kind of solutions. I don't have to start there. Maybe you can end there to be current, but that's not the right place to start. Number three, and this is kind of an old one, trends happen all the time, and I actually think they're kind of good. Sometimes you can relate to an era because of trends. I look fondly back on the days when Flash, pages, the homepage was there, and it was kind of cool. They were kind of fun. It's terrible now, but we do rely on these kind of trends a little too much, whether it's phone ringing or it's okay. I don't mind. It's happened to me before. Wait for it. I'm sorry. Thank you. So things like, you see it all the time. And what happens, especially with, I think, with current, UX patterns, I think. Patterns are great, but I think sometimes we start to rely on these kind of trends to solution for us. Number four, we have tools, I think, that play into our fears. So, for example, you have available to you all these icon sets. You have kind of UX, not a platform, but, you do have platforms like Squarespace. So even if you're into web design, Squarespace is great, but I think it's way too easy for people to kind of fall into, oh, that looks good as it is. And you start to erode your ability to start riffing, and you start accepting their solutions. Actually, I'll go back and say, there's another one too. And I love this tool, but things like Sketch, they are wonderful products. So this is kind of heresy, but I will say that for creativity, I think what's happening is it's so good that it's made our lives easy. And I think that by making it easier, we've kind of cut out some of the things that make us better. We forget to try new things. And finally, I think we're just afraid to look bad. And this you can see everywhere, whether it's an Instagram account where we always look happy or nice or whatever. I mean, it just happens to be this kind of thing where we don't like to be mistaken. We don't want to look, broken or bad. And so what does this all mean? How can I summarize this? And I think what's happening is we kind of have these mistake avoidance systems being set up. And it's not good because, and this sounds contrary to logic. You would think you'd want to avoid mistakes, but I think what's happening is we're kind of missing out on the key to being creative, or one of the keys, in my opinion, and that's discovery. We don't allow ourselves this paths to trip and find accidentally new things, new ways of thinking, and that's that is not good, and it's it drives us to this fear, which is in the end why I told you this story about my failure. For me, this was just kind of a nice opportunity to take my own medicine and say, looking bad's okay, because the benefits of just failing tragically, you learn. And I'm not ashamed to say that I failed. What I'm not going to do today is give you guys any kind of epiphany. As I said in the beginning, sadly, there is no solution for this. I'm sorry. There kind of isn't. But that's all right. I mean, I think what I'm going to say instead is that, restarting does suck. Just doing an incredible amount of work that you find to be important or significant, and then chucking it out, or having all this time that you feel that you've wasted. It's terrible. Telling someone that, it's kind of humiliating when you make a massive mistake. And those are all awful. But I will say that, it's preferable. I would rather see us kind of, making these gigantic, catastrophic failures and restarting than not, right? Because I think that means that we're kind of reaching. I knew that was going to be too distracting. But yeah, it does mean that we're reaching, that we're not concerned with stock answers, or that we're not just going through the motions. Because I think that being creative is yes, it's being able to imagine or see what other people can't, but it's that ability, that the calluses we develop to keep trying to make these things happen. That's important, because catastrophic failure and restarting, it's part of our and mistakes are part of our process, and when they do happen, we just restart. But before I finish, it is Friday and it's first snow day, and I said no platitudes of warm fuzziness, but I'm going to give you one. Happy Friday. Do good work. Thank you.